My mom left my crying daughter in the cold. Now she's freezing at my doorstep after I discovered she locked Lily outside on the balcony during a snowstorm because she threw a tantrum asking to call me during my shift. The champagne glass in my hand shattered against the marble floor of the hospital's anniversary gala as I stared at the video my sister Jennifer had just sent me. There was my 7-year-old Lily, pressed against the glass door of my mother's 15th floor balcony, her small hands blue-tinged and trembling, her breath creating desperate fog patterns on the frozen glass while fat snowflakes accumulated on her shoulders. Inside, clearly visible through the reflection, my mother Barbara sat on her velvet couch, calmly sipping tea, checking her watch with theatrical boredom. The timestamp read 43 minutes. 43 minutes my baby had been locked outside in 12-degree weather, wearing nothing but her unicorn pajamas. The audio file that followed made my blood turn to ice in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. Your mother doesn't love you. That's why she left me taking care of you, insufferable child. If she cared, she'd be here instead of at some fancy party with her doctor friends. You're just a burden she dumps on me whenever it's convenient. My mother's voice was crystal clear, dripping with venom I'd never heard directed at Lily before. Then came my daughter's small, broken sobs, the kind that come from a child whose world is crumbling. The recording continued with Lily begging, "Please, Grandma, I'm cold. I just wanted to say goodnight to Mommy. I'm sorry, please let me in." My mother's response was a harsh laugh. "You'll come in when you learn some respect. Your tantrum ruined my entire evening." I'm Sarah Mitchell, a trauma surgeon at Denver General, and I'd trusted my mother to watch Lily during my mandatory attendance at tonight's donor gala. Barbara Mitchell, pillar of the community, volunteer coordinator at 3 charities, the woman who'd raised me to believe family was sacred above all else. The same woman who'd spent the last 7 years making subtle comments about how I was raising Lily wrong by working so much, how I was too soft with discipline, how children in her day knew their place. I'd ignored the red flags because she was my mother, because Lily was my only child, and I was a single parent with impossible hours, because Barbara had seemed genuinely eager to help after my ex-husband abandoned us when Lily was 2. What I hadn't known until Jennifer's message was that my sister had installed a nanny cam in my mother's living room 6 months ago, after noticing bruises on her own son's arms. Jennifer had been gathering evidence, and tonight she'd captured something that made her break her silence immediately. As I stood there in my emerald gown surrounded by Denver's medical elite, I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not fear, something colder, something that calculated and planned. I smiled at the concerned colleague approaching me, retrieved my coat with steady hands, and told the valet I had a family emergency. My mother had just made the biggest mistake of her life, and she had no idea what was coming. The drive to my mother's penthouse took 12 minutes, but I made 3 stops first. By the time I pulled into her building's underground garage at 9:47 p.m., I had everything I needed. I'd called my attorney best friend Marcus from the car, forwarding him every file Jennifer had sent. I'd contacted my chief of surgery, invoking the emergency family leave clause in my contract, and I'd made one more call to someone whose number I'd kept for 3 years, someone who owed me a significant favor. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were surgeon steady as I rode the elevator up, my heels clicking against the marble with military precision. My mother answered the door in her silk robe, face mask still on, glass of Chardonnay in hand. "Sarah? What are you doing here? I told you Lily was already asleep." Her tone was annoyed, inconvenienced, as if I'd interrupted her spa night. Behind her, I could see Lily's coat and boots thrown haphazardly by the door, still wet from snow. The balcony door was closed now, condensation still visible on the glass. "Where is she?" My voice came out flat, controlled. "I said she's sleeping. Honestly, you're so paranoid. The child is fine." Barbara moved to close the door, but I pushed past her with enough force to make her stumble backward. "How dare you just barge into my home?" I walked straight to the guest room. Lily was there, buried under 3 blankets, still shivering despite being inside for over an hour. Her face was flushed with fever, her lips still slightly blue. When she saw me, she started crying so hard she couldn't breathe. "Mommy, I'm sorry. I won't ask to call you again, I promise." The words tumbled out between sobs, and each one was a knife in my chest. I scooped her into my arms, feeling how cold she still was through the blankets. "Baby, you did nothing wrong. Nothing. Do you understand me?" I carried her past my mother, who was now sputtering protests about disrespect and overreaction. I grabbed Lily's things from the entry without breaking stride. As I reached the elevator, I turned back to see Barbara standing in her doorway, face mask now removed, looking affronted and confused. "You're never seeing her again," I said simply. "And that's just the beginning." The confusion in her eyes shifted to something else, a flicker of nervousness. "Don't be dramatic, Sarah." So I left her outside for a few minutes to cool down. Children need firm discipline. You're too emotional, just like always. The elevator doors opened. "I have the video, Barbara. All 43 minutes. The audio, too. Marcus already has copies. So does hospital administration, since you're listed as my emergency contact and backup guardian. By Monday morning, so will every charity board you sit on." I stepped into the elevator with Lily still clutched in my arms. "You wanted to teach my daughter a lesson about consequences. Now you're going to learn one." As the doors closed, I saw my mother's face drain of color, her wine glass slipping from her fingers to shatter on her pristine white carpet. Lily buried her face in my neck, her small body still trembling. "Are we going home, Mommy?" "Yes, baby, we're going home, and Grandma is never going to hurt you again." But I wasn't done. Not even close. As I buckled Lily into her car seat, wrapping her in the emergency blanket I kept in my trunk, my phone was already buzzing with responses. Marcus confirmed he'd filed an emergency protection order that would be processed first thing Monday morning. My chief of surgery had responded with the hospital's lawyer's contact information, and a note that Barbara would be removed from all my employment records immediately. The third message was from Detective Lisa Chen, who I'd saved from a gunshot wound 2 years ago. She wanted to know when she could take my statement about suspected child endangerment and abuse. I looked at my mother's building in my rearview mirror, lights blazing from her 15th floor windows. She was probably up there right now telling herself I was overreacting, that this would blow over, that I'd come crawling back apologizing when I needed childcare again. She had no idea that Jennifer had 6 months of footage showing her grabbing her grandson roughly, locking him in closets, withholding meals as punishment. She didn't know that Jennifer and I had spent the last hour texting, coordinating, planning. She couldn't imagine that her 2 daughters, who she'd spent years pitting against each other, had just become united in a way that would destroy her carefully constructed image forever. As I drove toward the emergency clinic to have Lily checked for frostbite and hypothermia, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup was ruined, my gown was wrinkled, and I'd never felt more focused in my life. My mother had taught me one valuable lesson tonight. Some people mistake kindness for weakness right up until the moment it transforms into something else entirely. Barbara Mitchell was about to discover that her daughter inherited more than just her cheekbones. She got the steel too, and unlike my mother, I knew exactly where to cut for maximum damage. The emergency clinic doctor confirmed what I already knew. Early-stage frostbite on 3 of Lily's fingers, mild hypothermia, and acute psychological trauma. He documented everything with photographs and detailed notes, explaining that exposure to 12-degree weather for that duration could have resulted in permanent tissue damage or worse. "You got to her just in time, Dr. Mitchell," he said, his expression grim as he handed me the medical report. "Another 20 minutes and we'd be looking at possible amputation. At her age, with her body mass, this level of cold exposure is life-threatening." I watched him type "suspected child abuse by caregiver" into his report, knowing it would automatically trigger a mandatory report to Child Protective Services. Good. I wanted every official channel activated. Lily fell asleep in my arms during the examination, her small fingers bandaged, her body finally warm. I carried her to my car and drove home, my mind already 3 steps ahead. By the time I laid her in my bed surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals, it was past midnight. My phone showed 47 missed calls from my mother. I blocked her number without listening to a single voicemail. Jennifer arrived at my house at 7 the next morning with her son Kyle and 3 USB drives. "I have everything organized by date," she said, spreading the drives across my kitchen table while Lily and Kyle ate pancakes in the living room. 6 months of footage from Mom's place. The balcony incident is the worst, but there are at least 30 other instances of verbal abuse, physical rough handling, and emotional manipulation. With Kyle, she's pushed him, grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks, and locked him in the bathroom for an hour when he accidentally spilled juice on her carpet. Jennifer's hands were shaking as she poured coffee. I should have said something sooner. I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just how she parented and we'd forgotten. She hid it from us when we were kids, I said, pieces clicking into place. We never saw it because we were the ones experiencing it, and she made us think it was normal, strict discipline, high standards. I thought about all those times my mother had locked me in my room for minor infractions, the way she'd withheld affection as punishment, how she'd made me feel like I was never quite good enough. I'd spent my entire adult life trying to be different with Lily, softer, more present. And my mother had seen that as weakness to exploit. Marcus called at 9 a.m. The emergency protection order is filed. Judge Sanders is reviewing it personally since you included the medical reports and video evidence. She has grandchildren Lily's age. I expect approval within hours. His voice turned harder. Sarah, I've known you for 12 years. I've never seen you like this. Tell me what you're planning. I'm planning to make sure my mother never has the opportunity to hurt another child again, I said. Can you pull her volunteer records? Every organization she works with? I want to know everywhere she has access to children. The list Marcus sent back an hour later made my stomach turn. Barbara Mitchell volunteered at 3 elementary schools as a reading tutor, coordinated the children's wing at Denver Presbyterian Hospital, ran a youth mentorship program through her country club, and sat on the board of a foster care advocacy nonprofit. She had cultivated this grandmother of the year image so carefully, positioning herself as a child welfare expert. The irony was suffocating. Detective Chen arrived at noon to take my statement. She watched the balcony video twice, her jaw tightening with each viewing. Dr. Mitchell, I need to be straight with you. This is clear-cut child endangerment. With the medical documentation and your sister's additional evidence, we have grounds for criminal charges. Are you prepared to press them? Her pen was poised over her notepad, waiting. I thought about Lily's small voice begging to be let inside. I thought about my mother's laugh when she refused. Yes, I want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Chen nodded. I'll need to interview Lily when she's ready. We'll use a child psychologist to make it as gentle as possible. I'm also going to need Jennifer's footage and access to Kyle for his statement. She closed her notepad. Your mother is going to argue this was a one-time lapse in judgment. The pattern of behavior across multiple children is what will make the case stick. We'll move fast before she has time to establish a defense narrative. By Sunday evening, the machine I'd set in motion was operating at full speed. The protection order had been approved, legally barring my mother from any contact with Lily, or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. Marcus had drafted letters to every organization where Barbara volunteered, attaching copies of the police report and medical documentation. They'll all have these by Monday morning, he told me. Board liability means they'll have to suspend her immediately pending investigation. Her reputation is her currency, Sarah. We're devaluing it to nothing. Jennifer had contacted 3 other mothers from my mother's mentorship program, women whose children had participated last year. 2 of them immediately recalled their kids making complaints about Mrs. Mitchell being mean or too strict. One mother remembered her daughter coming home with a red mark on her wrist after a session where she'd talked back. They'd all dismissed it at the time because Barbara Mitchell was so respected, so involved, so seemingly devoted to children. Now they were talking to each other, comparing notes, remembering. The Whisper Network was activating. I spent Sunday night in Lily's room watching her sleep, checking her bandaged fingers every hour. She'd been quiet all day, clingy in a way that broke my heart. When I'd tried to explain that Grandma had made a very bad choice and wouldn't be visiting anymore, she'd just nodded and asked if it was her fault. No, baby, I'd told her firmly. Adults are responsible for keeping children safe. Grandma failed at that job. None of this is your fault. But I could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes, the way she kept asking if Grandma was sick, if that's why she'd been so mean. I had to explain that sometimes people make choices that hurt others, and those choices have consequences. My phone buzzed at 11 p.m., a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Catherine Park from the Foster Care Nonprofit Board. I received Marcus Goldstein's letter regarding Barbara Mitchell. We need to talk immediately. She's been our primary liaison for emergency placements. If what you're alleging is true, We may have placed vulnerable children in danger. My fingers tightened around my phone. The scope of what my mother had access to was even worse than I'd thought. I called Catherine back despite the hour. Ms. Park, everything in that letter is documented and verified. My mother locked my 7-year-old daughter on a balcony during a snowstorm for 43 minutes, causing frostbite and hypothermia. We have video evidence, medical reports, and police involvement. There's also a 6-month pattern of similar behavior with my nephew. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. If she had access to foster children, children who often can't advocate for themselves or might not be believed, I need you to understand the potential scope of harm. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Our emergency placement protocol has her listed as a safe transport volunteer. She's been picking up children from crisis situations and bringing them to temporary homes for the last 3 years. Oh God, we never thought to question her because she was so recommended, so credentialed. Her voice cracked. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Barbara Mitchell will be suspended immediately, and we're going to have to review every single placement she was involved with. If any children reported issues and weren't believed because of her reputation, then you document it all, I said, because my attorney is building a case that shows pattern and access. Every organization needs to investigate their own exposure independently. This isn't just about my daughter anymore. Monday morning, I took Lily to see Dr. Sarah Cho, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. While they talked in a room filled with toys and soft lighting, I sat in the waiting area and watched my phone explode. The Denver Post had picked up the story. Prominent volunteer arrested on child endangerment charges. Detective Chen had moved faster than I'd expected, obtaining an arrest warrant Sunday night. My mother had been taken into custody at 6 a.m., her booking photo showing her face slack with shock, her silver hair disheveled, still wearing her designer pajamas. The woman who'd always been so carefully put together looked small and frightened in that photo. I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The article was careful with details due to the ongoing investigation, but it mentioned multiple victims and pattern of abuse. By 9 a.m., 3 of the organizations had issued statements suspending Barbara Mitchell pending investigation. By 10 a.m., it was 5. The country club had revoked her membership entirely. Someone had leaked the balcony video to a local news station. Lily's face blurred for privacy, but the audio crystal clear. My mother's voice telling my daughter she wasn't loved played on loop across every news channel in Denver. Marcus called at 11. Sarah, your mother's attorney just contacted me. She wants to meet. She's offering a full confession in exchange for a plea deal and wants to discuss family reconciliation as part of her rehabilitation plan. His tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. They're trying to paint this as a grandmother who made a mistake and wants to make amends. Her lawyer is pushing the narrative that she had a mental health crisis and needs treatment, not prosecution. Tell them no, I said immediately. No meetings, no reconciliation. She goes to trial and she faces every single charge. I want a jury to see that video and hear that audio. I want it on public record exactly what she did. That's going to be harder on Lily, Marcus warned. She'll have to testify. I know. Dr. Cho will prepare her and I'll be there every step. But my mother doesn't get to hide behind closed-door plea deals and therapy sessions. She's spent 64 years building a reputation as someone who cares about children. I'm going to spend however long it takes destroying that lie completely. That afternoon, 2 more mothers came forward. Their children had been in my mother's mentorship program 3 years ago. One child had told her parents that Mrs. Mitchell had grabbed her roughly and called her stupid when she'd struggled with math homework. Another had come home saying Mrs. Mitchell had made her stand in the corner for 30 minutes for giggling. Both families had assumed their children were exaggerating or being oversensitive because Barbara Mitchell was so respected, so professional, so seemingly caring. Now they were filing formal complaints, their guilt over not believing their children evident in every word. Jennifer and I met with Detective Chen on Tuesday to provide Kyle's formal statement. He was 9 years old, small for his age, and his voice shook as he described the times Grandma had hurt him. She said if I told my mom, nobody would believe me because she's an important lady and I'm just a kid who gets in trouble sometimes, Kyle said, tears streaming down his face. She said Mom left me with her because I was too much work, just like she leaves Lily. Jennifer grabbed my hand so hard I lost circulation, both of us fighting to stay composed while Kyle spoke. Chen's expression was carved from stone as she took notes, occasionally asking gentle clarifying questions. By Wednesday, the foster care nonprofit had completed their internal investigation. Catherine Park called me personally to deliver the results. We interviewed every foster child who had contact with Barbara over the last 3 years. 7 children reported incidents ranging from verbal abuse to physical intimidation. 7, Dr. Mitchell. And none of them were believed because she was Grandma Barbara, the nice lady who brought them teddy bears and smiled a lot. Catherine's voice was thick with tears. These kids had already been through hell. They were in our care, our responsibility, and we gave them to someone who hurt them because she had the right credentials and said the right things. We failed them. Document everything, I told her. Those children deserve to have their stories heard too. They deserve to know an adult finally believes them. We're turning it all over to the DA's office, Catherine said. And we're implementing new protocols. Background checks, multiple references, supervised interactions until trust is established. This should never have happened. Barbara Mitchell weaponized our desperation for volunteers against the most vulnerable children in our system. The DA's office called Thursday morning. Dr. Mitchell, this is Assistant DA James Rodriguez. We're adding charges based on the foster care nonprofit's investigation. Multiple counts of child abuse, child endangerment, and abuse of a position of trust. Your mother's attorney is pushing hard for a plea deal, but given the scope of victims and the video evidence, we're prepared to take this to trial if you're willing to proceed. His tone was professional, but I could hear the anger underneath. I have a daughter Lily's age. I watched that video. Your mother isn't getting a pass from this office. Take it to trial, I said. Every charge, every victim. I want those children to see that speaking up matters, that they'll be believed, that powerful adults who hurt kids don't get away with it just because they have good reputations. Friday afternoon, I sat in Dr. Cho's office while she explained Lily's progress. She's struggling with misplaced guilt, which is normal for children in these situations. She feels like she caused the punishment by asking to call you. We're working on helping her understand that adults are responsible for their own choices. Dr. Cho's expression was compassionate but serious. Sarah, Lily is going to need consistent therapy for at least a year. The physical injuries will heal, but the emotional trauma of having someone she trusted hurt her and tell her she wasn't loved will take time to process. She's also going to struggle with trusting caregivers. You're going to need backup childcare, and introducing new people into her life will require patience. I nodded, having already anticipated this. I'd spoken with my chief of surgery about adjusting my schedule, trading trauma calls for more predictable surgical rotations. I'd also started interviewing professional nannies with trauma-informed training. The hospital had been unexpectedly supportive. Apparently, the story of what happened had spread through the medical center, and several colleagues had reached out offering flexible coverage for my shifts. Dr. Patricia Warner, our head of pediatrics, had even offered to testify as an expert witness about the medical severity of Lily's exposure if needed. That evening, Jennifer and I sat on my back porch while Lily and Kyle played inside, visible through the glass doors. Mom's been calling me from jail, Jennifer said quietly. 63 calls since Monday. I haven't answered a single one. Her attorney sent a letter saying she wants to apologize to both of us, that she's entering therapy, that she realizes she was wrong. Jennifer laughed bitterly. Wrong, like she forgot to water a plant or missed a birthday, not like she traumatized our children and God knows how many others. Are you okay? I asked. I know this is destroying the family structure we thought we had. The family structure we thought we had was built on her control and our compliance, Jennifer said. I spent my whole childhood thinking I wasn't good enough, that I had to earn her love by being perfect. I've been in therapy for 5 years trying to undo that damage, and I still almost didn't believe my own eyes when I saw her hurt Kyle. That's how deep her manipulation goes. She turned to look at me. You doing this? Taking her down publicly? Forcing accountability? It's not just about Lily. You're breaking a cycle that probably goes back generations. Our grandmother was apparently a nightmare too. Mom once mentioned it when she was drunk, said her own mother used to lock her in closets for hours. That explains it, but doesn't excuse it, I said. She knew exactly how that kind of treatment felt, and she chose to inflict it anyway. On her own grandchildren, on vulnerable foster kids. She made deliberate choices every single time. Jennifer nodded. I'm not going to her trial. I can't sit there and see her try to look sympathetic. But I'm giving Kyle the choice when he's older. If he wants to face her in court, I'll support that. If he never wants to see her again, I'll support that too. She stood up, preparing to gather Kyle. You know what the worst part is? I keep catching myself wanting to call her, wanting to tell her about something Kyle did at school or ask her advice about something. 38 years of conditioning doesn't just disappear because we finally saw who she really is. After Jennifer left, I found myself standing in Lily's doorway, watching her arrange her stuffed animals in careful rows. She was humming softly, seemingly content, but I could see the way she positioned herself where she could see the door, the way she startled at small sounds. My daughter would heal, but she'd carry these scars. And my mother had given them to her deliberately, methodically, while I'd been 20 minutes away saving other people's children. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Marcus warned me it would be a media circus. Your mother's attorney is going to try to paint her as a devoted grandmother who made a tragic mistake under stress. They're going to bring up your work schedule, suggest Lily was frequently abandoned with Barbara, imply that your mother was overwhelmed by childcare responsibilities she didn't sign up for. He looked at me seriously. They're going to make you out to be the bad guy, Sarah, the career-obsessed single mother who neglected her child and is now vindictively destroying her own mother to cover her guilt. Let them try, I said. I have medical records showing Lily was healthy and thriving until my mother's care. I have documentation that Barbara volunteered for childcare, that she actively insisted on it. I have her own words on audio calling Lily a burden while she was literally torturing her. And I have 7 foster children who are finally going to be heard. My mother doesn't get to play victim when she created so many. That night, I lay in bed next to Lily, her small body curved against mine, her breathing finally even and deep. Her bandaged fingers rested on my arm, a constant reminder of how close I'd come to losing her to permanent injury or worse. I thought about all the times I'd trusted my mother, all the warning signs I'd explained away, all the moments I'd chosen to believe her performance over my own instincts. Never again. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Barbara's bail hearing is tomorrow. DA is opposing release. Judge will likely set conditions, including no contact with minors and ankle monitor if she makes bail. Thought you should know. I typed back. Thanks. Keep me updated. Another text came through, this one from a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Mitchell, this is Amanda Price. My daughter was in your mother's mentorship program 2 years ago. I just saw the news. I need to talk to you about what happened to Emily. I should have said something then. I'm so sorry about your daughter. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of how many children my mother had hurt while wearing the mask of a caring grandmother and devoted volunteer. How many Amandas were out there carrying guilt over not speaking up? How many Emilys had been hurt and not believed? I texted Amanda back, contact Detective Lisa Chen at Denver PD. They need to hear Emily's story. It's not too late for her voice to matter. Within minutes, Amanda responded, Thank you. Emily is 14 now and she's been in therapy because of what your mother said to her. She's ready to talk. She wants to help your daughter. I closed my eyes, feeling something shift in my chest. Not grief, not even anger anymore. Purpose. My mother had spent years building an empire of hurt disguised as help. I was going to spend however long it took dismantling it brick by brick, ensuring every child she'd harmed knew they were believed, that their pain mattered, that the adult who hurt them would finally face consequences. Barbara Mitchell had taught me many things growing up: perfectionism, self-doubt, the constant fear of never being enough. But she'd failed to teach me the most important lesson: how to quit when I'd identified a problem that needed solving. And my mother, sitting in a jail cell in her designer pajamas, was a problem I was going to solve permanently. The courtroom was packed on the morning of the preliminary hearing. I'd arrived early with Jennifer, both of us dressed in conservative suits, projecting calm competence. Lily was not present. Dr. Cho had recommended she wait until the trial itself, if it came to that. But Kyle sat in the gallery with Jennifer's husband, Tom, the 9-year-old looking small but determined. Amanda Price was there too, with 14-year-old Emily, a tall girl with her mother's eyes, and a steel in her expression that reminded me of myself. My mother was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her silver hair pulled back severely, her face carefully composed. She scanned the courtroom and her eyes found mine. For just a second, her mask slipped. I saw rage there, pure and undiluted. Not remorse, not shame. Fury that I'd dared to expose her, that I'd taken away her carefully cultivated image and shown everyone what she really was. She thought she could intimidate me even now. That one hard look would make me back down like I had 1,000 times growing up. I smiled at her, cold, clinical, the smile I used before making the first incision on a difficult surgery. Her expression faltered. The preliminary hearing took 3 hours. The prosecution presented the balcony video in full. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as my mother locked Lily outside, as my daughter's small hands beat against the glass, as 43 minutes ticked by on the timestamp while Barbara Mitchell sipped her tea and checked her manicure. When the audio played, my mother's voice telling Lily she wasn't loved, calling her insufferable and a burden, I watched the judge's expression harden to granite. Then came the medical testimony. Dr. Hayes from the emergency clinic described Lily's injuries in clinical detail. Stage 1 frostbite on 3 fingers, core body temperature of 94.2 degrees, acute hypothermia requiring aggressive warming protocols. In my professional opinion, another 20 to 30 minutes of exposure would have resulted in irreversible tissue damage and potential cardiac arrest. At the victim's age and weight, this level of cold exposure is immediately life-threatening. The defense attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit named Richard Waverly, tried to suggest Lily had only been outside for a few minutes. Dr. Hayes, isn't it possible the child's injuries could have occurred from brief exposure if she was already unwell? Dr. Hayes looked at him like he was an idiot. The video timestamp shows 43 minutes. The progression of hypothermia symptoms visible in the footage is consistent with that duration. Additionally, the defendant is recorded on audio discussing the length of time the child has been outside. Your suggestion is medically and factually impossible. Waverly shifted tactics. But isn't it true that Mrs. Mitchell called 911 as soon as she realized the severity? Mrs. Mitchell did not call 911, Detective Chen interrupted from her seat. Dr. Mitchell arrived after being alerted by her sister and transported the child to emergency care herself. The defendant made no calls for medical assistance and, based on the video evidence, appeared to have no intention of ending the punishment until the child learned her lesson, which she states clearly on the recording. The prosecution then presented Jennifer's evidence. 6 months of footage showing escalating verbal abuse, rough physical handling, and isolation punishments with Kyle. The defense tried to characterize it as strict but traditional discipline, which made Jennifer stand up in the gallery. She locked my son in a bathroom for an hour because he spilled juice. He was 7 years old and terrified. That's not discipline, that's cruelty. Judge Sandra Matthews, a black woman in her 60s with a reputation for being tough but fair, called for order. Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate your passion, but please refrain from outbursts. Mr. Waverly, I've seen enough to determine that there is substantial evidence to proceed to trial on all charges. We will now hear from additional witnesses regarding the defendant's pattern of behavior. Catherine Park testified about the foster care nonprofit's findings. 7 children, ages 4 to 12, who had reported incidents with Barbara Mitchell. A 4-year-old who said Mrs. Mitchell had grabbed her face roughly when she wouldn't stop crying. A 10-year-old who reported being locked in a car for 20 minutes as punishment for being too loud. A 12-year-old who said Mrs. Mitchell had told him he'd end up in prison like his father if he didn't learn respect. Each incident was documented in our case files, Catherine said, her voice breaking. But because Mrs. Mitchell was so credentialed, so respected, the reports were noted, but not investigated. We failed these children by trusting her reputation over their voices. Then Amanda Price took the stand. My daughter Emily participated in Mrs. Mitchell's mentorship program when she was 12. She came home 3 times with complaints that Mrs. Mitchell was mean, that she said cruel things about Emily's weight and intelligence. I thought Emily was being oversensitive because Mrs. Mitchell had such glowing recommendations. I told Emily to toughen up. Amanda wiped her eyes. Last week, when I saw the news, I asked Emily to tell me everything. Mrs. Mitchell told my daughter she was too stupid for college, that she'd probably end up pregnant and on welfare, that girls like her never amounted to anything. Emily was 12. She's been in therapy for eating disorders and anxiety ever since. I should have believed her. The defense's cross-examination of Amanda was brief and unsuccessful. Waverly tried to suggest Emily had been a difficult child who required firm guidance. Mrs. Price, isn't it true your daughter had behavioral issues at school? My daughter had anxiety that started immediately after beginning the mentorship program, Amanda shot back. Before working with Barbara Mitchell, Emily was an honor roll student and class vice president. After 4 months with her, Emily was having panic attacks and her grades dropped 2-letter grades. The behavioral issues were trauma responses to systematic emotional abuse. Judge Matthews called a recess after Amanda's testimony. When we reconvened, Waverly made his pitch for bail reduction and dismissal of some charges. Your Honor, my client is a 64-year-old woman with no prior criminal record. She's a pillar of the Denver community who has dedicated her life to helping children. This incident with her granddaughter, while regrettable, was a single lapse in judgment during a stressful evening. Mrs. Mitchell is willing to attend anger management and parenting classes, to make full restitution to her daughter, and to accept supervised visitation parameters. She poses no flight risk and no danger to the community. I nearly laughed out loud at the sheer audacity. The prosecutor, Ada James Rodriguez, stood up with barely controlled fury. Your Honor, the defendant systematically abused multiple children over a period of years, using her reputation and community standing to avoid accountability. She nearly killed her 7-year-old granddaughter and showed no remorse, no recognition of wrongdoing until she was arrested. The evidence shows a clear pattern of predatory behavior targeting vulnerable children. She is a danger to any minor she has contact with. Judge Matthews didn't hesitate. Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. Given the number of victims, the severity of injuries, and the clear pattern of predatory behavior, I find the prosecution's concerns about community safety to be well-founded. Mr. Waverly, your client is facing 7 counts of child abuse, 4 counts of child endangerment, and 2 counts of abuse of position of trust. She will not be released. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. I watched my mother's face crumble, the careful mask finally shattering. She turned to look at me again, and this time there was no rage, just shock and the beginning of real fear. She'd expected this to go away. She'd expected her reputation, her connections, her ability to manipulate and control to save her. She was realizing, perhaps for the first time in her life, that there were consequences she couldn't charm or intimidate her way out of. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. I'd prepared a statement with Marcus's help. My mother systematically abused my 7-year-old daughter and multiple other children over a period of years. She used her reputation as a community volunteer to gain access to vulnerable children and hurt them. I'm speaking publicly because those children deserve to be believed, and because no reputation should shield someone from accountability when they harm kids. My daughter is recovering physically, but the emotional damage will take years to heal. I'm grateful to the Denver DA's office, to Detective Chen, to the brave families who came forward, and to Judge Matthews for taking this seriously. Child abuse is not discipline. Torture is not teaching. And my mother will face every consequence her actions deserve. The questions came fast. Do you think your mother can be rehabilitated? Will you ever forgive her? Some people are saying you're being vindictive. How do you respond? I looked directly into the cameras. Some people think holding abusers accountable is vindictive. Those people are wrong. My mother made choices every single time she hurt a child. Calculated, deliberate choices. She's not a victim of stress or circumstance. She's a predator who used her grandmother image to access victims. As for forgiveness, that's not mine to give. It belongs to the children she hurt. If they choose to forgive her someday, that's their decision. But I will never forget what she did, and I will never stop fighting to make sure she can never do it again. Jennifer stepped up beside me. Our mother spent our entire childhoods teaching us to be perfect, to never question her, to accept her treatment as love. It took becoming mothers ourselves to recognize that what she did to us, and what she's doing to our children, isn't love. It's control and cruelty. We're breaking that cycle today. That evening, my phone exploded with messages. 3 more families had contacted Detective Chen with complaints about Barbara Mitchell spanning back 5 years. 2 former elementary school students reported that she'd been verbally abusive during tutoring sessions. A woman I'd gone to high school with sent a Facebook message. "Your mom used to volunteer as our softball team chaperone. She grabbed my arm so hard she left bruises when I struck out in a championship game. I was 15 and terrified. I'm so glad you're doing this." The scope of damage kept expanding like an infection spreading from a central wound. How many children had my mother hurt? How many years had she been doing this? I thought about my own childhood, the punishments that had seemed strict but acceptable, the emotional manipulation that I'd normalized. How much of what I'd experienced was abuse I'd just been conditioned not to name? Dr. Cho called that night to check on me. "Sarah, I want you to consider starting your own therapy. What you're experiencing now, reviewing your childhood through the lens of recognizing your mother's abuse, is going to be difficult. You're not just protecting Lily. You're also mourning the mother you thought you had and coming to terms with the one who actually existed." She was right. Some part of me kept waiting to feel guilty, to regret going public, to wish I'd handled this privately. But that guilt never came. Instead, I felt clear-headed and focused. My mother had hurt my daughter. She'd hurt my nephew. She'd hurt vulnerable foster children and dozens of other kids over years. Every day she remained free was another day she could have hurt someone else. I'd done the only thing that made sense. I'd stopped her permanently. Lily asked about Grandma that night at bedtime. "Mommy, is Grandma in jail because of me?" I pulled her close. "Grandma is in jail because she made bad choices that hurt you and other children. None of this is your fault. Adults are responsible for their own actions. Grandma knew it was wrong to lock you outside in the cold. She knew it was wrong to say mean things to you. She did it anyway. The consequences she's facing now are because of her choices, not yours. Will I have to see her again?" "Not unless you want to," I promised. "And if you never want to see her again, that's okay. You get to decide who is in your life based on how they treat you, and people who hurt you on purpose don't get to be in your life anymore." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Kyle said his mom doesn't want to see Grandma anymore either." "That's right. Aunt Jennifer is protecting Kyle the same way I'm protecting you. That's what moms do." Are you sad that Grandma was mean?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. I'm sad that Grandma chose to be mean when she could have chosen to be kind. I'm sad that she hurt you and that she hurt other kids. But I'm not sad that she has to face consequences for what she did. Does that make sense? Lily nodded slowly. Dr. Cho says sometimes people make bad choices and it's not our job to fix them. It's our job to be safe. Dr. Cho is very smart, I said. And you are safe now. I promise you that. After Lily fell asleep, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and my laptop, reading through the flood of messages that had come in since the hearing. Former students of my mother's tutoring sessions, parents whose children had participated in programs she'd run, even a few of my own childhood friends who'd been afraid of her when they'd visit my house. The pattern was overwhelming and heartbreaking. One message in particular caught my attention. Dr. Mitchell, my name is Rebecca Santos. I was a foster child 20 years ago before the current system was in place. Your mother was my temporary guardian for 3 months when I was 11. She was not a safe person. I reported her to my caseworker at the time, but nothing happened because she was so good to volunteer her home. I've carried that with me for 2 decades. Thank you for finally stopping her. I wish someone had believed me then. I replied to Rebecca immediately. Please contact ADA Rodriguez. Your experience matters and deserves to be heard, even 20 years later. I'm so sorry you weren't believed. I believe you now. Marcus called at 10 p.m. The DA wants to add charges based on the new reports coming in. They're talking about upgrading to felony assault in some cases based on the severity and pattern. Your mother is looking at serious prison time, Sarah. Minimum 5 years, possibly 15, depending on how the trial goes. Waverly is going to come back with another plea deal offer. They're going to push hard for a deal that avoids trial. What kind of offer? I asked, though I already knew my answer. Probably plead to reduce charges, 5 years with possibility of parole after 3, mandatory therapy, lifetime ban from working with children, probation after release. They'll frame it as justice served while avoiding the trauma of trial for the child victims. No deal, I said immediately. Those children need to see her convicted at trial. They need to see that when they tell the truth, adults listen and abusers are held accountable. A backroom plea deal sends the message that powerful people can still negotiate their way out of consequences. That's not the message I want Lily and Kyle and Emily and all the others to learn. Trial is going to be brutal, Marcus warned. Lily will have to testify. You'll have to testify. The defense will attack you personally. They'll bring up your ex-husband's abandonment, your work schedule, every parenting choice you've made. They'll try to paint your mother as a victim of your neglect. Let them try, I said. I have 7 years of pediatrician records showing Lily was healthy and happy. I have testimony from her teachers that she was thriving. I have proof that my mother volunteered for childcare, that she insisted on it. Most importantly, I have that video and audio recording. Lily's voice begging to be let inside while my mother laughs. No cross-examination can explain that away. The trial was set for 2 months out. In the interim, I focused on Lily's healing and my own preparation. Dr. Cho worked with Lily twice a week, helping her process the trauma and prepare for the possibility of testifying. We practiced deep breathing exercises. We talked about telling the truth even when it's scary. We reinforced over and over that none of this was her fault. Jennifer and I coordinated with the other families, creating a support network for the children who would testify. Amanda's daughter, Emily, became an unofficial leader, the oldest of the victims, and the one who could articulate most clearly what had been done to her. I want to tell the judge what she said to me, Emily told me during one of our group meetings. I want her to know that words hurt just as much as being locked outside. She made me hate myself for 2 years. I'm not going to let her pretend that was helping me. The prosecution's witness list grew to 23 people: children, parents, caseworkers, medical professionals, school officials, each one with a piece of the puzzle that was Barbara Mitchell's decades-long pattern of abuse. Waverly tried twice more to negotiate a plea deal. Both times, I refused to even consider it. 6 weeks before trial, my mother sent a letter through her attorney. Marcus brought it to me sealed, saying he'd advised against reading it, but the choice was mine. I opened it that evening after Lily was asleep. Sarah, I know you're angry with me. I know I made mistakes with Lily that night, but this has gone too far. I'm your mother. I raised you, sacrificed for you, gave you every opportunity. And now you're destroying my life over a moment of poor judgment. These other families are lying to get attention or money. I never hurt those foster children. They're troubled kids who make up stories. You know me. You know I would never deliberately harm a child. I was strict with you and Jennifer because I wanted you to be strong, to succeed. Everything I did was out of love. You're going to regret this when I'm gone and you realize you destroyed your own mother over a misunderstanding. Please drop the charges. Let's handle this as a family. I'll apologize to Lily. I'll do therapy. We can fix this if you'll just stop this vindictive crusade. You're hurting our family. Think about what Jennifer's children will think of you for tearing their grandmother away. Think about how Lily will feel when she's older and realizes she destroyed her grandmother's life. Is this really what you want my legacy to be? Don't do this to me. Don't do this to yourself. I'm begging you as your mother to show mercy. Remember who changed your diapers, who sat up with you when you were sick, who paid for your education. I made you who you are. You owe me better than this. I read it twice, waiting to feel something. Guilt, doubt, sadness. Instead, I felt a cold, crystalline anger. My mother was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to rewrite history, still trying to make herself the victim. She'd hurt my daughter badly enough to cause frostbite and hypothermia, and she was calling it a moment of poor judgment. She was calling traumatized foster children liars. She was invoking her sacrifices as if they'd earned her the right to torture a 7-year-old. I wrote back a single paragraph. You had 43 minutes to let Lily inside. 43 minutes while she begged and cried and her fingers turned blue. You had 6 months to stop hurting Kyle. You had years to stop abusing foster children. At any point, you could have chosen kindness over cruelty. You didn't. These are not mistakes or moments of poor judgment. These are deliberate choices you made repeatedly because you enjoyed having power over small, helpless people. You will face every consequence your actions deserve. I owe you nothing but the truth, and the truth is, you're a child abuser who finally got caught. See you in court. I gave the letter to Marcus to file as evidence of my mother's refusal to accept responsibility. It would be useful to show her mindset, her continued victim blaming, her lack of genuine remorse. The media attention intensified as trial approached. Barbara Mitchell's case had become a symbol of how easily abusers could hide behind respectability and community standing. Advocacy organizations for foster children were watching closely. Dr. Cho was interviewed on local news about recognizing signs of abuse in trusted caregivers. Jennifer and I did one joint interview where we talked about breaking cycles of generational trauma. The day before trial, I took Lily to her favorite park. We swung on swings and fed ducks and ate ice cream. She seemed lighter lately, less jumpy, more willing to laugh. Dr. Cho said she was progressing well, but would likely always have some trust issues with caregivers. That was okay. Healthy skepticism was better than the blind trust that had let my mother hurt her. "Mommy," Lily said as we walked back to the car, "I'm scared to talk to the judge tomorrow." "I know, baby, but Dr. Cho will be right there with you, and I'll be in the courtroom. And all you have to do is tell the truth about what happened. The judge just wants to hear your story in your own words." "What if Grandma gets mad at me?" "Grandma doesn't get to be mad at you," I said firmly. "She's the one who did something wrong. You were just a kid who wanted to call her mommy. There's nothing wrong with that. Grandma is facing consequences for her choices, not for yours." "Kyle said his grandma from his dad's side can be our new grandma if we want," Lily said. "She makes really good cookies and she's never mean." I smiled. "That sounds nice. We can definitely visit her more often if you'd like." "Yeah," Lily said. "I think I'd like a nice grandma instead." That night, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but from a kind of restless energy. Tomorrow, everything my mother had done would be laid bare in a court of law. Tomorrow, all those children would finally be heard. Tomorrow, justice would begin. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution was methodical and devastating. They started with the video of Lily on the balcony, forcing the jury to watch all 43 minutes. Several jury members were visibly upset, one woman wiping tears throughout. The audio of my mother's voice calling Lily a burden, saying she wasn't loved, played in the silent courtroom. I watched the jury's faces harden with disgust. I testified on day 2. Ada Rodriguez walked me through that night step by step, receiving Jennifer's message, seeing the video, the drive to my mother's apartment, finding Lily feverish and still cold an hour after being brought inside. "Dr. Mitchell, in your professional medical opinion, how serious was your daughter's condition?" Rodriguez asked. "Life-threatening," I said clearly. At 7 years old, Lily weighed 47 pounds. Her body mass to surface area ratio made her extremely vulnerable to rapid heat loss. 12-degree weather with wind chill, 43 minutes of exposure wearing only thin pajamas, no coat, no shoes, on a 15th floor balcony with nowhere to seek shelter. Dr. E. Hayes testified that another 20 to 30 minutes would have resulted in permanent tissue damage and potential cardiac arrest. In my professional opinion, my mother came very close to killing my daughter through exposure. Waverly's cross-examination tried to paint me as an absent mother who'd left my child with an overburdened grandmother. "Dr. Mitchell, isn't it true you work 60 to 80 hours per week? That you frequently leave Lily with caregivers because of your demanding career?" "I work 45 to 50 hours per week," I corrected. "Standard for an attending surgeon. I have a professional nanny for my regular work schedule. My mother volunteered specifically to cover occasional evening events like the hospital gala. She wasn't overburdened. She actively insisted on helping because, in her words, grandmothers should be involved. And I trusted her because she's my mother, and I had no reason to believe she would torture my child." "Torture is a strong word, Dr. Mitchell. Isn't it possible your mother was simply using old-fashioned discipline methods and made an error in judgment about the weather?" I looked him dead in the eye. My mother locked a 7-year-old child outside during a blizzard for 43 minutes while the child begged to be let inside. She laughed about it. She told my daughter she wasn't loved. That's not discipline. That's torture. And the weather wasn't an error in judgment. She could see Lily through the glass door. She could see the snow falling. She watched my daughter's lips turn blue and did nothing. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Jennifer testified on day 3. She presented the 6 months of footage from her nanny cam, each incident worse than the last. The jury watched my mother grab Kyle's arm hard enough to make him cry out, watched her lock him in a bathroom for an hour, watched her withhold his dinner as punishment for being too loud. They saw her patterns clearly: isolation, verbal abuse, physical intimidation, all calibrated to stay just under the threshold of what would leave obvious marks. Kyle testified on day 4. At 9 years old, he was articulate and heartbreaking. Grandma said if I told my mom, nobody would believe me because I get in trouble at school sometimes. She said she was an important lady and I was just a bad kid. She said my mom left me with her because I was too much work. His voice shook, but didn't break. She hurt my arm a lot. And she said mean things about my dad and my mom. She said they didn't really love me or they wouldn't leave me with her. The foster children testified over days 5 and 6. 7 children now between ages 6 and 14, each with their own story of how Barbara Mitchell had abused her position of trust. The youngest, a 6-year-old named Marcus, could barely articulate what had happened, but knew that the nice lady stopped being nice and hurt me. The oldest, a 14-year-old named Jasmine, was eloquent in her fury. Mrs. Mitchell told me I was trash just like my birth mother. She said foster kids like me would never amount to anything. She grabbed my face hard when I cried and told me to stop being weak. I was 10 years old and she was supposed to be helping me. Instead, she made me feel like I deserved everything bad that happened to me. Catherine Park testified about the nonprofit's failures. We trusted Barbara Mitchell's credentials and reputation over our own protocols. We should have investigated the first complaint. Instead, we noted it and moved on because she seemed so dedicated. That failure allowed her to hurt 6 more children in our care. We failed them catastrophically. Emily testified on day 7. At 14, she was old enough to understand exactly what my mother had done and articulate enough to destroy the defense's case. Mrs. Mitchell told me I was too fat to ever be pretty. She said I was stupid and would probably end up pregnant and on welfare. She said these things every week for 4 months while she was supposed to be mentoring me. I developed an eating disorder. I started having panic attacks. My grades dropped from A's to C's. I hated myself because I believed what she said. That's what she does. She finds vulnerable kids and she breaks them down. Not because she's trying to help. Because she likes having power over people who can't fight back. Waverly tried to suggest Emily was exaggerating or misremembering. Miss Price, isn't it possible Mrs. Mitchell was simply being honest about your weight as a health concern? That you interpreted tough love as cruelty? Emily looked at him with such withering contempt that several jury members actually smiled. Calling a 12-year-old fat and stupid isn't tough love, it's abuse. And I didn't misremember anything. I wrote it all down in my journal because my therapist told me to document my feelings. Would you like me to read you the entries? I can quote exactly what she said and when she said it. Waverly declined. Lily testified last on day 8. Dr. Cho sat beside her in the witness box. Ada Rodriguez asked simple, direct questions. Lily, do you remember the night you were locked on the balcony? Yes. Her voice was small but clear. Can you tell the judge what happened? I wanted to call Mommy to say goodnight. Grandma said no. I asked again because I always call Mommy before bed. Grandma got really mad. She pulled me to the balcony and pushed me outside and locked the door. Lily's hands twisted in her lap. It was really cold and snowing. I knocked on the door and asked to come in. Grandma just sat on the couch and looked at me. I kept knocking and crying. She didn't move. How long were you outside, Lily? I don't know, a really long time. My hands hurt. I was so cold I stopped feeling it. I thought maybe Mommy wouldn't find me. Tears ran down her face. Grandma said Mommy didn't love me. She said that's why Mommy left me with her. She said I was too much trouble. Do you believe that now? No. Dr. Cho says my mommy loves me a lot, and Grandma was wrong. Waverly's cross-examination of Lily was brief. Even he seemed to recognize that aggressively questioning a 7-year-old victim would destroy any sympathy the jury might have for his client. He asked only a few gentle questions about whether Lily understood the difference between punishment and accident, whether Grandma had ever been nice to her before that night. Lily answered honestly, she was nice sometimes, but she was mean a lot too. She just hid it from Mommy. The defense's case was weak. Waverly called 2 character witnesses, a woman from my mother's church who testified that Barbara was always so kind and devoted, and a former neighbor who said she'd never seen any concerning behavior. Ada Rodriguez destroyed both on cross-examination by asking if they'd ever been present when my mother was alone with children. Both admitted they hadn't. My mother did not testify. Waverly had clearly advised against it, knowing Rodriguez would eviscerate her on the stand. Instead, they relied on a psychologist who testified that Barbara showed signs of caregiver burnout and maladaptive coping strategies, rather than malicious intent. Rodriguez countered with the prosecution's psychologist, who testified that the pattern of behavior showed calculated abuse of power and predatory targeting of vulnerable victims. Closing arguments were on day 8. Rodriguez was masterful. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've seen the evidence. You've heard from the victims. You've watched 43 minutes of a 7-year-old child suffering while her grandmother sat inside, warm and comfortable, deliberately letting her suffer. Barbara Mitchell is not a victim of burnout. She's not a grandmother who made a mistake. She is a calculating child abuser who used her reputation as a shield to hurt vulnerable children for years. She hurt her own grandchildren. She hurt foster children who had already been traumatized and were looking for safety. She hurt students who trusted her to mentor them. And when she was finally caught, she showed no remorse, only anger that she'd been exposed. The defense wants you to believe this was poor judgment, but poor judgment doesn't last 43 minutes while a child begs for mercy. Poor judgment doesn't happen repeatedly across multiple victims over multiple years. That's not judgment. That's choice. Barbara Mitchell chose to hurt children. Now you must choose to hold her accountable. Waverly's closing tried to create doubt. The prosecution wants you to believe that Barbara Mitchell, a woman who dedicated her life to helping children, suddenly became a monster. That's not what happened. This is a family tragedy. A grandmother overwhelmed by modern childcare expectations. A daughter who works too much and is now projecting her guilt onto her mother. Yes, Mrs. Mitchell made errors that night with Lily. She admits that. But errors are not crimes. Burnout is not abuse. Don't let the prosecution turn a family dispute into a criminal conviction. Show mercy to a woman who has already lost everything. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman was a black woman in her 50s who'd taken notes throughout the trial. She read the verdicts with a steady voice. On count 1, child abuse of Lily Mitchell, we find the defendant guilty. On count 2, child endangerment of Lily Mitchell, we find the defendant guilty. She continued through all 13 counts. Guilty, guilty, guilty. My mother's face went white. She swayed in her seat, Waverly grabbing her arm to steady her. I felt Jennifer grab my hand, both of us breathing for what felt like the first time in 8 days. Around the courtroom, I could see the families of the other victims crying with relief. Emily was sobbing into her mother's shoulder. Kyle was hugging his dad. Catherine Park had her head in her hands. Judge Matthews set sentencing for 2 weeks out. Mrs. Mitchell, you have been convicted of 13 counts of child abuse and related charges. You will remain in custody until sentencing. This court stands adjourned. The gavel came down with a crack of finality. As they led my mother away in handcuffs, she turned to look at me one last time. Her face was twisted with rage and something else. Disbelief. She still couldn't comprehend that I'd actually done this, that I'd taken her down completely. I met her eyes and smiled. She'd spent my entire childhood teaching me to be perfect, to be tough, to never quit. I'd finally learned the lesson, just not the way she'd intended. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed again. I'd prepared a statement. Justice was served today. 13 children will go to sleep tonight knowing they were believed, knowing their voices mattered, knowing that the adult who hurt them is being held accountable. My daughter can begin healing with the knowledge that she'll never be hurt by her grandmother again. Thank you to the jury for their careful consideration, to Judge Matthews for her fairness, to Ada Rodriguez for his tireless advocacy, and to every family who had the courage to come forward. This verdict says clearly, child abuse is not discipline. Reputation does not shield abusers, and children will be believed and protected. Jennifer stood beside me, Kyle in her arms. Our mother's conviction is not just about punishment. It's about breaking cycles. It's about refusing to let abuse hide behind family loyalty and community standing. It's about teaching our children that they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, always. That night, I lay in bed with Lily curled against me. Her bandaged fingers healed now, but the scars still visible. "Mommy, why did the jury say Grandma was guilty so many times?" "Because she hurt you, and she hurt Kyle, and she hurt 7 other kids. The jury listened to everyone's stories and decided that what Grandma did was very wrong. So now there are consequences. What happens to her now? In 2 weeks, the judge will decide how long Grandma has to stay in jail. It will probably be a long time because she hurt a lot of people." Lily was quiet for a moment. "Is it bad that I'm not sad?" "No, baby. You get to feel however you feel. Grandma hurt you. It's okay to be angry at her. It's okay to not miss her. Your feelings are your feelings, and they're all okay." "I feel safer," Lily said slowly. "Like something scary isn't there anymore." "That's because you are safer," I told her. "Grandma can't hurt you ever again. I made sure of that. You saved me, Mommy." I kissed the top of her head. "Always, baby, always." Sentencing day arrived cold and bright. The courtroom was packed again, every victim's family present. Judge Matthews had reviewed pre-sentencing reports, victim impact statements, and sentencing recommendations. The defense pushed for the minimum, 5 years, citing my mother's age and health. The prosecution asked for the maximum, 15 years, citing the number of victims and pattern of predatory behavior. Judge Matthews looked at my mother with an expression of pure contempt. "Mrs. Mitchell, I have been a judge for 23 years. I have seen many defendants stand where you stand now. Some show remorse. Some show understanding of the harm they caused. You have shown nothing but indignation that you were caught. Even now you maintain that you were helping these children, that your strict discipline was necessary, that these victims and their families are lying or exaggerating. You have learned nothing." She continued, her voice growing harder. "You targeted the most vulnerable children you could find. Foster children who had already been traumatized. Your own grandchildren who trusted you completely. Students who looked up to you. You used your reputation as a respected community volunteer to gain access to these children. Then you systematically abused them. You are, in my assessment, a predator. And the law is clear on how we treat predators who harm children." My mother was shaking now, Waverly whispering urgently to her. Judge Matthews wasn't finished. "The harm you caused is incalculable. 7-year-old Lily Mitchell could have died from exposure. Her mother, a trauma surgeon, had to perform emergency care on her own child because you locked her outside during a blizzard as punishment for asking to call her mother. 9-year-old Kyle Mitchell developed severe anxiety and trust issues from your repeated abuse. 14-year-old Emily Price spent 2 years in therapy for an eating disorder you triggered with your calculated cruelty. 7 foster children, already traumatized by their circumstances, were further victimized by someone who was supposed to offer them safety. The betrayal of trust you committed is staggering." Judge Matthews picked up her sentencing document. "On counts 1 through 13, I sentence you to the maximum penalty allowed by law. 12 years per count on the child abuse charges, 10 years per count on the endangerment charges to run consecutively. Total sentence, 146 years in prison." The courtroom erupted. My mother collapsed, Waverly catching her. Jennifer grabbed my arm, both of us in shock. 146 years. My mother was 64. She would die in prison. Judge Matthews gavelled for order. "Furthermore, upon release, if you survive your sentence, you will be permanently barred from any contact with minors, will be required to register as a child abuser, and will serve lifetime probation with ankle monitoring. You will never be in a position to harm another child. Take her into custody." As guards moved to restrain my mother, she finally broke. "Sarah, Jennifer, please, I'm your mother. You can't let them do this to me. I raised you. I gave you everything. Please." Her voice was desperate, pleading. Nothing like the cold control she'd always maintained. She was being dragged away, and she was begging her daughters to save her. Jennifer turned away without a word. I looked at my mother one last time. "You had 43 minutes to show Lily mercy," I said clearly. "I'm showing you exactly what you showed her. Nothing." The last thing I heard as the doors closed was my mother screaming my name. It sounded like she was finally understanding that she'd lost. Completely. Permanently. Everything she'd spent 64 years building, gone. Her reputation, destroyed. Her freedom, forfeit. Her family, done with her forever. Outside the courthouse, the victim families celebrated. It felt strange to call it that, celebrating, but there was undeniable joy in seeing justice served so completely. Emily hugged me, crying. She can't hurt anyone else, ever. Thank you for not backing down. Amanda Price shook my hand. You gave Emily her power back. You showed her that speaking up matters. That's a gift we can never repay. Catherine Park approached with tears streaming down her face. Those foster children can finally close this chapter. They were believed. They were protected. The system failed them, but you didn't. Thank you. Ada Rodriguez found me as the crowd thinned. Dr. Mitchell, that was the most satisfying verdict I've delivered in 15 years. Your mother got exactly what she deserved. More, actually. Judge Matthews went above what I even asked for. Good, I said simply. She hurt children for fun, for power, for decades. 146 years isn't enough, but it's what we have. That evening, my house was full. Jennifer and her family, Marcus and his wife, Dr. Cho, Amanda and Emily. Even Detective Chen stopped by with congratulations. Lily and Kyle played in the living room, their laughter the best sound I'd heard in months. They were safe. They were healing. They were finally free of the woman who'd hurt them. Jennifer raised a glass. To Sarah, for having the courage to blow up our entire family structure to protect her child. For refusing to value politeness over safety. For showing all of us what real love looks like. I clinked my glass against hers. To us. For breaking the cycle. For believing our children. For choosing their safety over our mother's reputation. Later, after everyone had left and Lily was asleep, I stood in my backyard looking at the stars. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Barbara Mitchell sentenced to 146 years for child abuse. The article detailed her crimes, the trial, the verdict, the sentence. It would be the top story for days. My mother's name would forever be associated with child abuse, with cruelty, with predatory behavior. Everything she'd worked so hard to build, destroyed completely. I felt nothing but satisfaction. This was justice. Real, permanent, uncompromising justice. My mother had taught me many things growing up. Perfectionism, control, the importance of reputation. But she'd failed to teach me the most important lesson. That some things, some people, some situations don't deserve second chances. They deserve consequences. Barbara Mitchell got her consequences. And I got my daughter back. 6 months after sentencing, life had found a new rhythm. Lily was thriving in therapy, her nightmares down to once a month instead of nightly. Her frostbite scars had faded to thin white lines, barely visible unless you knew to look. She'd started second grade with a new teacher who knew her history and was extra gentle. Dr. Cho said Lily's resilience was remarkable, that children could heal from almost anything with proper support and safety. Jennifer and I had grown closer than we'd ever been. Trauma had a way of clarifying relationships. We'd both started our own therapy, working through the realization that our childhood had been abusive too, just subtle enough that we'd normalized it. Our therapist specialized in adult children of narcissistic parents. Your mother trained you to believe that her treatment was love, she explained. Breaking that conditioning takes time, but you're doing it. You're giving your children what you didn't have: safety, unconditional love, and freedom from emotional manipulation. Kyle was doing better too. His anxiety had decreased with regular therapy, and the knowledge that his grandmother was permanently out of his life. He'd started sleeping in his own room again, something he hadn't done in over a year. Jennifer said he seemed lighter, more willing to play and be silly, less worried about being perfect all the time. The foster care nonprofit had completely overhauled their volunteer protocols. Every volunteer now underwent extensive background checks, psychological evaluation, supervised trial periods, and regular check-ins with both caseworkers and the children. Catherine Park had made it her mission to ensure what happened with my mother never happened again. We created a system that protected reputations over children, she'd said in a press conference. That ends now. Children's safety is our only priority. Several of the families had filed civil suits against my mother for damages. Not that there was much to take. Her assets had been seized to pay legal fees, and the civil judgments were largely symbolic. But the principle mattered. Every lawsuit was another public record of what she'd done, another barrier to anyone ever rehabilitating her image. I'd received hundreds of messages from other survivors of childhood abuse, people who'd seen the trial coverage and recognized their own experiences. "You showed me it's never too late to hold abusers accountable," one woman wrote. "My mother did similar things to me 30 years ago. I always thought I had to forgive her because she's family. Watching you refuse to accept that lie gave me permission to protect myself and my kids from her." The trial had sparked a larger conversation about how society enables abusers with good reputations. Op-eds were written about the danger of valuing credentials over complaints, of trusting community standing over children's voices. Several states had passed new laws requiring stricter volunteer oversight and mandating belief of child abuse reports regardless of the accused's reputation. My mother's appeals had been denied at every level. She'd tried to argue that the sentence was excessive, that she'd been denied a fair trial, that the judge was biased. Every court that reviewed the case upheld the verdict and sentence. One appellate judge wrote in their opinion, "The defendant's pattern of predatory behavior toward vulnerable children, combined with her complete lack of remorse, justifies the maximum sentence. This court finds no error in the trial proceedings, and no grounds for appeal." I'd visited the prison exactly once, 3 months after sentencing. Not to see my mother, but to deliver a letter that I wanted on official record. The letter was simple. "Barbara, you have sent me 37 letters asking for forgiveness, for visits, for me to advocate for early release. The answer is no. It will always be no. You tortured my daughter. You abused my nephew. You preyed on vulnerable foster children. You spent decades hurting kids and using your reputation to avoid consequences. I don't forgive you. I never will. Lily is thriving without you. Kyle is healing without you. All the children you hurt are safer because you're locked away. That's the only legacy you get. Die mad about it. Sarah." The prison had confirmed the letter was delivered and added to her permanent file. My mother had apparently collapsed after reading it, requiring medical attention. I felt nothing about that except a cold satisfaction that she was finally understanding the permanence of her situation. Lily asked about her grandmother occasionally, usually around holidays or when she saw other kids with grandparents. "Do you think Grandma misses me?" she asked one evening while I was tucking her in. "Probably," I answered honestly. "But missing someone doesn't mean you deserve to see them. Grandma hurt you very badly. She hurt a lot of kids. She's in jail because she made terrible choices, and now she has to live with the consequences. Does she wish she hadn't done it? I think she wishes she hadn't been caught," I said carefully. "That's different from being truly sorry. Being sorry means understanding that you hurt someone and feeling bad about causing them pain. Grandma mostly feels bad that she got in trouble, not that she hurt people." Lily thought about that. "I'm glad she can't hurt kids anymore." "Me too, baby. Me too." 1 year after sentencing, Jennifer and I organized a gathering for all the families involved in the case. We rented a pavilion at a local park and invited everyone: the Foster families, Amanda and Emily, Detective Chen, ADA Rodriguez, Dr. Cho, Catherine Park. We called it a healing celebration rather than a trial anniversary. The focus was on how far the kids had come, how much they'd healed, how strong they'd been. Emily, now 15, had written a speech. "A year ago, I testified in court against someone who hurt me. I was terrified. I thought no one would believe me because I was just a kid, and she was this respected community volunteer. But I was believed. And that changed everything for me. It showed me that my voice matters, that telling the truth about abuse isn't being dramatic or vindictive. It's being brave. I'm in therapy, I'm healing, I'm getting straight A's again. And I know that happened because adults finally protected me instead of protecting my abuser's reputation. Thank you to Dr. Mitchell and Mrs. Stevens for showing us that kids deserve to be believed and protected. Always." Kyle and Lily played together with the other kids, a group of children at various stages of healing but all moving forward. They were bonded by shared experience but not defined by it. They were more than victims. They were survivors choosing to thrive. Detective Chen pulled me aside. Dr. Mitchell, I've worked child abuse cases for 12 years. Most of them end in plea deals, minimal sentences, families reuniting after therapy, victims being told to forgive and move on. Your case was different. You demanded real accountability, and you got it. You changed the standard for what justice looks like in these cases. Other victims see what you accomplished, and they're finding courage to come forward too. You started something bigger than one trial. Good, I said. Every child who speaks up and is believed, every abuser who faces real consequences, that's one more kid who gets to heal instead of being told to accept abuse as love. Ada Rodriguez joined us. Have you heard? The state bar is investigating Waverly for ethics violations. Turns out he knew about some of the other victims and deliberately didn't disclose them during discovery. He's probably going to be disbarred. Just thought you'd like to know that everyone who enabled your mother is facing consequences. I smiled. Even better. The whole system that protected her is being dismantled piece by piece. As the sun set and families began to leave, Amanda approached me with Emily. Dr. Mitchell, Emily wanted to tell you something. Emily looked at me seriously. When I testified, you smiled at me from the gallery. Do you remember? I did. She'd been shaking on the stand, her voice barely audible. I'd smiled to let her know she was doing great. I remember. That smile is what got me through it, Emily said. I was about to break down to say I couldn't do it. But you smiled like you believed in me, like you knew I was strong enough. So I kept going. I just wanted to say thank you for that, for believing I was brave enough to tell the truth. I hugged her. You are brave. So much braver than you know. And what you did, testifying at 14 about something painful and personal, you helped save other kids. You made sure my mother couldn't hurt anyone else. That's heroism, Emily. She wiped her eyes. My therapist says I'm allowed to be proud of surviving and speaking up, that it's not bragging or attention-seeking, it's acknowledging strength. Your therapist is absolutely right, I said. You survived something terrible and you turned it into something powerful. Be proud of that. That night, Lily asked me to read her favorite book before bed, the same one we'd read together since she was a toddler. As I read about brave characters facing dragons and darkness, she interrupted. Mommy, you're like the knight in the story. You fought the dragon for me. We fought it together, I told her. You were so brave testifying. You told the truth even though it was scary. That's real courage, Lily. The dragon is gone forever now, she said with satisfaction. It can't hurt me anymore. That's right, baby. The dragon is locked away forever. You're safe. As Lily drifted to sleep, I thought about my mother in her cell, probably lying awake wondering how her golden reputation had turned to ash. She'd spent 64 years building an image of herself as devoted, caring, selfless. It had taken one video and 8 days of trial testimony to destroy it completely. She'd die in prison, forgotten except as a cautionary tale about predators hiding behind respectability. I felt no guilt about that. None. My daughter was safe. My nephew was safe. 7 foster children would never be hurt by her again. Future children who might have fallen into her orbit were protected. That's what mattered. Not my mother's suffering in prison, not her destroyed reputation, not her pleading letters that I threw away, unread. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about consequences that matched actions. It was about protecting vulnerable people from those who'd hurt them. It was about refusing to value family loyalty over child safety. My mother had taught me to prioritize image over substance, reputation over truth. I'd learned the opposite lesson, that truth matters more than image, that children matter more than reputation, that real love protects instead of harms. Barbara Mitchell was serving 146 years because she'd earned every single one of them through decades of deliberate cruelty. I'd handed her exactly what she deserved, and I'd sleep soundly every night knowing it. 2 years after the trial, I received a notification that my mother had died in prison. A heart attack at 66, brought on by untreated hypertension and the stress of incarceration. The prison chaplain called to inform me, asking if I wanted to claim the body or arrange services. No, I said simply. I'm not her next of kin. I'm the mother of a child she tried to kill. Handle it however you handle unclaimed remains." The chaplain hesitated. "Ms. Mitchell, I understand there was conflict, but she was still your mother. Perhaps you might want to—" "She spent 64 years being a monster who hurt children," I interrupted. "She spent 2 years in prison facing consequences. That's her complete story. There's nothing else to say. I won't be claiming her body or attending any service. Goodbye." I hung up and sat for a moment, waiting to feel something. Grief, relief, satisfaction. Instead, I felt only a quiet sense of completion. My mother's story was over. The children she'd hurt were healing. The systems that had enabled her were reformed. Justice had been served, and now she was gone. I told Lily that evening. "Your grandmother died today in prison." Lily looked up from her homework. "Is that sad?" "Do you feel sad?" I asked. She thought about it carefully. "No. I feel okay. Like something that was scary isn't there anymore." "Is that bad?" "No, baby. You get to feel however you feel. Grandma hurt you. It's okay to feel relieved that she's gone and can never hurt you again." "Will we go to her funeral?" "No. We're going to keep living our lives and being happy. That's the best thing we can do." Lily nodded and went back to her homework, unbothered. She was 9 now, thriving in 4th grade, in dance classes, in friendships with kids who'd never known the scared, traumatized 7-year-old she'd once been. She'd grown up free of my mother's influence, surrounded by people who loved her safely. That was my mother's real legacy. The absence of her in our lives had made us happier and healthier. Jennifer called that night. "Did you hear?" "Yeah, prison chaplain called. I told them to handle it. I'm not involved." "Same. Tom asked if we should do something for closure. I told him we got our closure 2 years ago when she was sentenced. This is just the epilogue." "How do you feel?" I asked. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, relieved. I kept having nightmares that somehow she'd get out early, that she'd show up and try to hurt Kyle again. Now that's impossible. She's gone. We're safe. The kids are safe. That's all that matters. "Kyle okay?" "He's good. When I told him, he just said okay and went back to playing video games." Our therapist says that's a healthy response. She wasn't significant enough in his life for her death to be traumatic. She's just the bad person who went away, and now she's more away. Kids are resilient when they're protected. The local news ran a brief obituary. Barbara Mitchell, 66, died in prison while serving a 146-year sentence for child abuse. Mitchell was convicted in 2025 of multiple counts of child abuse, endangerment, and abuse of position of trust involving her grandchildren and foster children. She is not survived by family. That last line was my doing. When the prison had asked for family information, I'd told them clearly, she has no family. The people related to her by blood disowned her when she was convicted of torturing children. Put down no survivors. Because that was the truth. The Barbara Mitchell who'd been my mother died the night I saw that video. The woman in prison was just a criminal serving time, and now she was dead, unmourned by the people she'd abused for decades. I framed the news obituary and hung it in my home office, not as a memorial, as a reminder. Not survived by family was the only legacy my mother earned through her choices. She'd valued power and control over love. She'd hurt vulnerable children for her own satisfaction. And in the end, she'd died alone, forgotten, her name synonymous with cruelty. Lily saw the framed article one day and asked about it. "Why did you keep that, Mommy?" "To remember an important lesson," I told her, "that how you treat people matters, that you can't hurt others and expect them to still love you. That family is about safety and love, not blood. Your grandmother chose cruelty over kindness her whole life. So when she died, nobody mourned. That's what happens when you spend your life hurting people." Is that scary? To die alone? I think it's the natural consequence of treating people badly. If you want to be loved and remembered, you have to be loving and memorable for good reasons. Your grandmother was memorable for hurting kids, so nobody wanted to remember her. Lily studied the obituary. "I want to be remembered for being kind." "Then be kind," I said simply. "It's a choice you make every day. Your grandmother made the wrong choice every time. You can choose differently. 3 years after the trial, 5 years after that terrible night on the balcony, I watched Lily perform in her school play. She was 11 now, confident and bright, playing the lead role with enthusiasm. In the audience sat Jennifer and her family, Marcus and his family, Dr. Cho, Amanda and Emily, and a dozen other families from the trial support group we'd maintained. After the show, we all went to dinner together, 3 tables pushed together at Lily's favorite restaurant. The kids sat together, laughing and joking, passing garlic bread and telling silly stories. They were normal kids having a normal evening. The trauma they'd shared was part of their history, but it didn't define them anymore. Emily, now 18 and preparing for college, sat next to me. Dr. Mitchell, I'm majoring in child psychology. I want to specialize in working with abuse survivors. What happened to me, to Lily, to all of us, it gave me purpose. I know what it feels like to not be believed. I'm going to make sure every kid I work with knows they'll be believed and protected. You're going to be amazing at it, I told her. You turned your pain into power. That's the best revenge against people like my mother. Living well, succeeding, being happy and healthy, showing that their cruelty didn't break you. Is it weird that I'm grateful sometimes? Emily asked quietly. Not for what happened, but for learning I was strong enough to survive it. For learning I deserved better. For learning that speaking up matters. It's not weird, I said. Trauma can be a teacher if we let it. You learned you're a survivor. You learned your voice has power. Those are valuable lessons, even if the cost was too high. Kyle, now 12, had joined the conversation. I barely remember Grandma now. Mostly I just remember being scared. But then I remember that my mom and Aunt Sarah stopped her. That's what I think about when I do remember. That adults protected me. That was the legacy I wanted. Not the trial, not the sentence, not my mother's name in the news. The legacy of children knowing they'd be believed and protected. The legacy of breaking cycles. The legacy of choosing safety over family loyalty, truth over reputation, justice over forgiveness. As we left the restaurant, Lily slipped her hand into mine. Best day ever, Mommy. Yeah, baby, best day ever. We walked to our car under clear stars, surrounded by people who loved us safely, moving forward into a future unburdened by the past. My mother was gone, taking her cruelty with her. We remained, thriving in the space her absence created. That was the real victory. Not her suffering in prison, not her death alone and unmourned, but our joy, our healing, our choice to thrive despite everything she'd done to break us. We survived her, outlasted her, and built lives filled with the love and safety she'd never been capable of giving. Barbara Mitchell had spent 66 years trying to control and diminish everyone around her. We'd spent 5 years proving she'd failed. We were stronger, happier, healthier, and more loved than she'd ever been. We were the legacy she couldn't destroy, the evidence that cruelty doesn't win. And every single day we spent living well was another day we proved that the best revenge isn't violence or cruelty in return. It's survival. It's thriving. It's being happy in spite of those who tried to break you. My mother wanted to teach me lessons about perfection and control and power. Instead, she taught me about consequences, resilience, and the fierce protectiveness of real love. Not the lesson she intended, but the one I needed, and I passed that lesson to my daughter. You don't have to accept cruelty disguised as love. You have the right to protect yourself and those you love. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is make sure someone dangerous can never hurt anyone again. Lily would never remember much about her grandmother. The memories that remained would fade further with time and therapy. She'd remember being scared, being cold, and then being saved. She'd remember that when bad things happened, her mother made them stop. She'd remember being believed and protected. That was enough. That was everything. We drove home through the Denver night, my daughter humming show tunes in the back seat, my future bright and unburdened. My mother was dead. Her victims were healing. Justice had been served completely. I'd won, and I'd never regret a single choice I made to ensure that victory was permanent.